That summer, I moved Laura and her son, Dylan, into my home on the edge of Phoenix. The desert air smelled of dust and heat, the kind that hums against the glass until midnight. By noon the walls shimmered in the light, bending the horizon into something unreal. I remember thinking it felt like a clean slate, the kind of brightness that could burn away the past. I repainted every room before they arrived. Chose colors carefully. Soft sand for the hallway, pale blue for Dylan's room, the same shade as the sneakers he'd worn the first time I met him. I bought new furniture, replaced the kitchen table that had belonged to my ex-wife, built a small basketball hoop in the backyard. I wanted him to know this wasn't just my house anymore. I wanted him to believe it could be ours. When the moving truck came, Laura stood in the driveway with her hand on her hip, smiling at me like this was the beginning of something right. Dylan stayed inside the car, earbuds in, pretending to scroll through his phone. I walked over, opened the door, offered to help with his bag. He didn't look up, just said, "I got it." From that moment, I knew the work ahead of me would be invisible, the kind of work that doesn't earn applause, only silence. The first nights were quiet, too quiet. The house, once filled with the hum of renovation, paint fumes, drills, music playing low on the radio, settled into an uneasy calm. Laura unpacked slowly, humming to herself. Dylan kept to his room. His door was always shut, the faint blue glow of his screen leaking through the cracks like a secret. I told myself it was just an adjustment period, that boys his age were moody by default. But the distance between us wasn't moody. It was deliberate. At dinner, he'd sit across from me, shoulders tense, chewing slowly as if every bite was an act of endurance. I'd ask about school, his friends, practice, anything to open a door. His answers came clipped, 1 or 2 words at a time. Fine. Yeah. I guess. Then silence. Always silence. Laura tried to smooth things over. She'd touch my arm, smile, that careful smile that says be patient. He'll come around. And I believed her because I wanted to, because I'd already begged *n loving him in the way a man loves what he chooses, not what he's given. I drove him to basketball practice every afternoon. Picked him up when it was dark, the gym lights glowing like a false dawn. He rarely spoke on those drives. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window, earphones in, jaw set tight. Once, when I asked about a game, he said, "Mom already knows. You don't have to." That one stung more than I admitted. At home, I'd find his dishes in the sink, his shoes kicked off in the hallway, the faucet left running in the bathroom. Normal teenage things, I told myself. Harmless. But what wore me down wasn't the mess. It was the message beneath it. This isn't your space. It's mine, and you just happen to live here. Laura would notice my mood sometimes. She'd lean against the counter, watching me scrub a plate or fix the squeaky hinge on Dylan's door. "He's just adjusting," she'd say softly. "Adjusting to what?" I'd ask. "To you." Her voice always had that small tremor at the end, guilt maybe, or fear that she'd chosen one man at the cost of another. Weekends, I tried harder. Planned little things, barbecues, movie nights, drives into the desert to see the stars. Dylan rarely joined. When he did, he'd scroll through his phone, laugh at something unseen, and disappear halfway through the night. Laura would make excuses. Homework, friends, tired. I stopped asking. But every time I fixed something around the house, a leaky pipe, a dead outlet, a jammed drawer, I felt like I was auditioning, building evidence that I belonged. And still, the wall between us grew. I started noticing how Laura's laughter changed when he was around. Softer, hesitant, as though she needed to make space for his disapproval. When she and I sat together, we spoke easily, naturally. But the moment Dylan entered the room, her shoulders stiffened. Conversations died mid-sentence. She'd look to him, not me. A small shift, but one that cuts deeper than words. One night, I heard him in his room talking on the phone. He didn't know I was outside the door. "Yeah," he said, laughing. "Mom's boyfriend thinks he's my dad now." My chest went hollow. I stood there, holding a plate I'd meant to bring him, and for a second I imagined smashing it against the floor. But I didn't. I just walked back to the kitchen, put the plate down, and sat in the dark for a long time. That was the first crack. Not his words, but my silence afterward. I didn't tell Laura. I didn't confront him. I just buried it the way men bury everything that hurts too much to name. Still, I kept trying. I helped with his school projects, bought him new sneakers when his old ones tore. He thanked me once, barely looking up. It sounded more like a formality than gratitude. By August, the house had split into territories. Dylan's room, sacred and untouchable. Laura's room, shared but distant. And mine, the garage. That's where I started spending most of my evenings. The air smelled of oil and wood dust. I built shelves I didn't need, fixed tools that weren't broken. Anything to stay busy. Anything to avoid the sound of laughter coming from the living room without me. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear Laura talking softly to him in the kitchen. The sound carried down the hallway like a secret I wasn't meant to hear. Once, I caught my name in her whisper, and his response. "He's not my dad." Simple. Final. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, the fan spinning shadows across the room. Every choice I'd made, repainting the walls, buying furniture, building that basketball hoop, felt like a man decorating a room in a house that was already haunted. Still, I told myself, patience. Be the bigger man. Love them until they love you back. But love, I learned, doesn't work like that. You can't pour it into a void and expect it to echo. By September, the mornings had grown colder. Dylan barely said goodbye when I dropped him off at school. Laura would kiss me on the cheek, distracted, her eyes already drifting toward her phone. I'd drive to work through the heat haze, feeling like a ghost behind the wheel, a man invisible in the life he built. At night, when the desert finally cooled and the cicadas went quiet, I'd sit outside by the basketball hoop, the one I built for him. The net hung loose now, frayed at the edges, the ball half deflated. I'd stare at it, remembering how I'd imagined the sound of laughter echoing off those backboards, the shared joy of a father and son. It never came. What came instead was the slow, certain realization that love, in this house, moved in one direction only. From me toward them, and it never came back. It happened on a Thursday. The kind of evening that begins with small hopes. The table set neatly, the smell of roasted chicken filling the house, soft music playing low from the speaker I'd bought for the living room. I'd left work early, stopped for flowers, even ironed a shirt. I wanted the night to feel normal, to remind all of us that a home can still be something warm if someone tries hard enough. Laura was in the kitchen when I came in, sleeves rolled to her elbows, humming as she basted the chicken. I watched her for a moment, the way the light caught her hair, the way she moved without noticing me. It struck me then, how quiet beauty becomes when love starts to fade. You still see it, but you stop belonging to it. Dylan wandered in later, wearing his hoodie despite the heat. He barely glanced at me, went straight to the fridge, grabbed a soda, and dropped into a chair with the weight of someone forced into captivity. I told myself to ignore it. I told myself that tonight, things would be different. I carved the chicken, poured the wine, even lit a candle. It felt almost ceremonial. A family scene from a magazine, a man, a woman, a teenage boy, 3 plates, 3 chances to start over. We ate mostly in silence. Laura asked about Dylan's practice. He shrugged, muttered something about the coach. I added a few words about teamwork, about staying focused, but he didn't respond. His fork scraped against the plate, the sound sharp enough to feel like a warning. Halfway through, I reached for the salad bowl and asked, "Dylan, could you pass that over?" He froze. The fork hit the plate with a loud metallic crack. When he looked up, his eyes were different. Not bored this time, but burning with something darker. "You're not my dad," he said. Just like that. Laura's hand stopped midair, the glass trembling slightly. The candle flickered between us, throwing small shadows across his face. I didn't move. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Then he pushed his chair back, hard enough that it scraped the tile, and stood. I said, "You're not my dad. You don't get to tell me anything." The words hit harder than any shout. They came clean, measured, as if he'd rehearsed them. Laura opened her mouth. Maybe to scold him, maybe to soothe me, but no words came. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the soft buzz of the music still playing behind us. I wanted her to say something, to break the spell, to defend me. She didn't. Dylan walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway, the door to his room slamming a heartbeat later. I sat there, staring at the space he'd left behind. The chair, the half-eaten meal, the faint smell of the candle mixing with the bitterness of burned meat. Everything felt wrong, too small, too fragile, as if the walls themselves had heard him and were deciding whose side they were on. Laura reached across the table, touched my wrist. "He didn't mean it," she whispered. But she was lying, and we both knew it. That night, I lay awake long after she'd fallen asleep beside me. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand why silence hurt more than insult. The boy had said his piece, cruel, yes, but clear. She had said nothing at all, and that nothing hollowed me out. In the morning, I drove him to school anyway. He sat beside me, eyes on his phone, headphones in, pretending I didn't exist. When we pulled up to the curb, he muttered a flat thanks and stepped out before the car had stopped moving. I watched him walk away, backpack hanging off one shoulder, sunlight catching the back of his neck. A stranger wearing the face of the child I'd tried to love. At work, I couldn't focus. Every conversation felt distant. Numbers blurred on the screen. When my boss asked if I was all right, I lied and said I hadn't slept. It wasn't entirely untrue. That evening, I came home to laughter. Dylan and Laura were in the living room watching a show, some comedy with canned applause. He was smiling, really smiling, the way he never did around me. She was laughing too. When they noticed me in the doorway, the laughter stopped, like someone had turned off the sound. Dylan looked away. Laura offered a polite smile, the kind you give a guest who's stayed too long. I went to the garage, sat there in the dim light, notebook open on the workbench. I started writing, not complaints, just sentences, fragments of thought, reminders to myself not to lose control. Don't yell. Don't break things. Don't give them another reason to call you the outsider. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the words blurred into scratches. The next few days became a pattern. Dylan ignored me openly. When I fixed something around the house, he'd mutter under his breath, "Mom's wallet, house manager, maintenance guy." The first time I heard it, I laughed. The second time, I didn't. By the third, the words had started to stick. Laura said nothing. Maybe she didn't hear, maybe she pretended not to. Either way, her silence gave him permission, and my silence gave him power. One night, I overheard him on a call with a friend, laughing. "Yeah, Mom's wallet fixed the sink again." His tone was light, careless, but every laugh felt like a nail driven into the frame of this house I'd built for them. Ethan, my own son from my first marriage, noticed. He came to stay with us on weekends. A quiet boy, older than Dylan by a year, cautious, polite. He watched the tension grow, said little. But I could see the way he avoided the living room, the way he lingered near the door, as if he already knew the hierarchy here. One afternoon, I found him in the garage with me. He was holding a wrench, pretending to help. After a long silence, he asked, "Why does he hate you so much?" I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Because I remind him of what he doesn't want to owe." He nodded slowly as if he understood. Maybe he did. Weeks passed. The distance hardened into routine. Meals were quiet. Laughter only returned when I left the room. Dylan's small cruelties multiplied. An eye roll here, a smirk there, the occasional door left open just to test me. Each one was minor, but together they built a wall I couldn't climb. Laura started to withdraw too. She'd spend evenings in Dylan's room under the pretext of homework or talking things through. I'd sit on the porch, listening to their muffled voices through the open window. Sometimes I'd catch my name. I never caught the tone, but I didn't need to. Tone is the easiest thing to imagine when you're already guilty of caring too much. The night before everything finally broke, I tried again. One last gesture. I bought takeout from Dylan's favorite place, set the table neatly, poured 3 glasses of lemonade. When they came home, I greeted them with a smile that felt forced even to me. He looked at the table, then at me. "What's this supposed to be?" "Dinner," I said. "For us." He shrugged, dropped into a chair, and started scrolling through his phone. Halfway through the meal, I asked about his grades. He smirked. "Why do you care? You're not paying for college." Laura *T him a warning look, but he didn't stop. "Seriously, Mom, why does he keep pretending? He's not my dad. He's just—" I stood before he could finish. Not in anger, in exhaustion. The chair scraped back, and for a moment, even Dylan looked startled. "Enough," I said quietly. "I get it." He blinked, then looked at Laura as if expecting her to scold me instead. She didn't. I left the table, went to the garage again. The same notebook lay open on the workbench. I flipped to a clean page and wrote a single line. "There's a point where patience turns into begging." I stared at those words until they blurred. The next morning, Dylan didn't speak to me. Neither did Laura. The kitchen smelled of burnt toast, and the sound of her laughter from the night before was gone. I realized then that the house had changed shape. No longer a home, just a structure containing 3 people pretending not to notice the fracture spreading through its walls. And still I stayed, because that's what men like me do. We stay long after we should have left. We confuse endurance with love, silence with strength. But that dinner, that one simple sentence, "You're not my dad," it never stopped echoing. It followed me into every room, into every morning, into every breath. It was the line that divided before and after, the crack that would one day swallow everything whole. It happened quietly, the way most endings do. Not with shouting, but with a single act that made silence feel final. The morning started like any other. The air already hot before sunrise. The sky over Phoenix the color of old brass. I left early for work, coffee cooling in the cup holder, the house still half asleep behind me. I remember glancing at the basketball hoop as I drove off, the same one I'd built that first summer. The net hung torn, the metal warped by sun and neglect. I told myself I'd fix it that weekend. I didn't know I'd never touch it again. When I came home that evening, the driveway felt wrong. My old pickup, the only thing I'd owned long before Laura, sat crooked, dust coating the hood. But something caught my eye. Long, jagged scratches carved into the driver's side door, deep enough to reach metal. Someone had dragged a key or maybe a nail across it, slow and deliberate. Inside the house, Dylan was sprawled on the couch, phone glowing in his hand. "Did you see what happened to my truck?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Yeah, guess the desert's got claws." "Don't play smart. Did you do it?" He smirked. "You'll pay anyway. You're not family, just Mom's wallet." The words hit harder than the scratches. I stood there for a long moment, waiting for Laura to appear, for her to say something, anything. But she didn't. She was upstairs, folding laundry maybe, pretending not to hear. That was the moment I broke. Not loud, not angry, just empty. I walked to my office, closed the door, and sat at the desk where I kept the family's accounts. Years of careful saving, payments, subscriptions, auto debits, all lined up like obedient soldiers waiting for orders. I opened my laptop and began closing them one by one. First the gas cards, then the credit lines, then the tuition savings I'd started for Dylan, tucked away like a secret hope. Insurance, streaming services, grocery deliveries, gone, gone, gone. Each click felt like pulling a nail out of my own hand. But it was cleaner than rage. It was control. By the time I finished, the house was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioner. I stared at the screen, the list of closed accounts glowing back at me. The balance of my own checking account, untouched for years, finally looked whole again. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. That night I packed a small duffel bag. Clothes, wallet, a few old notebooks, the photograph of my son Ethan as a child. I left the ring Laura had given me on the nightstand. Not as a message, just as truth. Something once worn, now set aside. At dawn, I walked through the house one last time. Dylan's shoes were by the door, half untied. Laura's coffee mug sat in the sink, lipstick smudged on the rim. Ordinary things, the kind that make up a life, and yet they looked foreign now, like evidence from someone else's home. I wrote a note on the counter. Don't call. Take care of each other. Then I left. No door slamming. No goodbye. Just the sound of gravel under my tires as I drove away. I didn't go far. About 2 hours north, near Lake Pleasant. There was a small cabin I'd rented years ago for a fishing trip with Ethan. I remembered the key still hung on the same rusty nail outside the porch. When I arrived, the air smelled of pine and dust. The lake shimmered under the sun, empty and still. I unpacked, made a sandwich, sat on the porch. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel hostile. Felt earned. That night I slept deeply. No voices, no slamming doors. Just the low creak of the cabin breathing around me. The next morning, my phone was full of missed calls. Laura, mostly. A few texts from Ethan. Mom's trying to reach you. Is everything okay? But I didn't answer. I watched the lake instead. The light shifting across the water like time itself deciding whether to forgive me. Days passed. Then weeks. The calls kept coming. The tone of her voicemails changing little by little. Soft at first, then confused, then angry, then desperate. Where are you? Dylan needs you to transfer money for school. Please, can we talk? Bills are stacking up. You can't just walk away. But I could. And I had. The house payments stopped. The Wi-Fi shut off. The streaming accounts they loved blinked into error screens. The grocery deliveries never arrived. Each silence they faced was a message more honest than words. This is what life looks like without the man you dismissed. A month in, Ethan came to visit. He stood on the porch, taller than I remembered, holding 2 cups of gas station coffee. You really left, he said quietly. I did. They're not doing great. I know. He sat beside me, watching the water. Dylan got a job at a car wash. Laura's working nights again. They talk about you like you're dead. I nodded. Maybe that's for the best. He looked at me for a long time. You think this is the only way? I turned to him. It's the only way they'll ever understand what I gave them, what I was worth. He didn't argue. He just handed me the second coffee and sat there until the sun went down. In the evenings, I wrote in my notebook, the same one I used to fill with reminders to stay calm. Now it held something else. Observations, lessons, fragments of understanding I hadn't had the strength to face before. Love without respect becomes servitude. Silence can be a P*N, but absence is justice. You can't build a family on gratitude that never comes. The lake reflected the moon that night like a mirror that refused to lie. I watched it until I fell asleep in the chair, the notebook open on my chest. Weeks later, I heard that Dylan had totaled his car. No injuries, just carelessness. Laura called me 3 times that day. No voicemail, no apology. Just the raw panic of a woman who finally realized the safety net was gone. I didn't answer. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. By then, I had N to feel lighter. My mornings were simple: coffee, long walks, the sound of birds where arguments used to be. I fixed the porch steps, mended a fishing rod, wrote letters I never mailed. Sometimes, in the stillness, I wondered if I'd gone too far. If maybe, somewhere between betrayal and self-preservation, I had crossed into something colder. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me that night. Eyes full of contempt, voice steady with conviction. You'll pay anyway. And I realized I already had. For years. Leaving wasn't revenge. It was the first honest transaction I'd ever made. By the second month, the messages stopped. No more calls. No more demands. Just silence, the truest kind. I didn't need to ask how they were doing. I could feel it. The kind of humility that only comes when comfort disappears. I thought about going back once, maybe to collect the rest of my things. But each time I imagined the drive, the heat shimmering over the highway, I stopped myself. Some places rot faster when revisited. Still, in quiet moments, I found myself missing small things. Not them, but the illusion. The way I used to believe in the word ours. The way I used to think patience could mend what blood had severed. But patience, I've learned, isn't a cure. It's just a slow form of denial. One evening, as the sun set behind the ridge, I opened the notebook and wrote one final line. Sometimes the only way to be heard is to vanish. And with that, I closed it. The lake held its color until darkness took it, and I sat there listening to the world breathe without me. For the first time, it didn't feel lonely. Felt right. A month passed before I went back. The days had end to cool, the desert shedding its heat the way a snake leaves behind its skin. Nights at the lake grew colder too. Mist crept off the water in slow, silver waves that hid the shore until sunrise. I could have stayed there forever, alone with the quiet and the slow rhythm of my own breathing. But there was one thing left unfinished. My things, my tools, the fragments of a life I had once believed was permanent. I told myself it was practical, a retrieval, not a reunion. Yet as I loaded the truck, I felt that old unease in my chest, the tremor that comes before confrontation. The road back to Phoenix shimmered in the heat like a mirage, long and endless. Each mile peeled away the calm I'd built. When I turned onto the street, the house looked smaller. The lawn was patchy, the blinds drawn. A place that had once tried so hard to appear alive now seemed to be holding its breath. I parked at the curb and sat there for a while, watching the windows, waiting for movement. Nothing. Only the hum of the air conditioner struggling against the sun. Laura opened the door before I knocked. She must have been watching from inside. Her face looked different. Tired, thinner. The glow she used to carry dimmed to something gray. "You came back," she said, her voice soft, uncertain. "I'm just here for my things," I replied. She nodded, stepped aside. The air inside was thick with the stale smell of neglect. Old dishes, dust, faint traces of perfume that no longer belonged to her. The living room was almost bare. A few boxes stacked in the corner, the couch threadbare, the television dark. Dylan was outside washing the car. The same car I'd helped him buy. The hose sputtered weakly as he ran it over the hood, the water pooling beneath his shoes. When he saw me, he froze. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't run or hide. He just lowered the hose and stared at the ground. I walked past him toward the garage, where I'd kept my tools. The door creaked as it lifted. Everything was still there, organized, untouched, waiting. I began loading boxes into the truck without a word. The sound of metal on metal echoed through the afternoon. After a few minutes, Laura came outside. "He left you something," she said. I turned. She was holding a folded piece of paper. The corners were soft from being handled too much. "What is it?" "A note. From Dylan." I hesitated, then took it. The handwriting was rough, the lines uneven. "Sorry. I didn't get what you were trying to teach us. I'm working now. I understand. Just that. No greeting, no signature." I read it twice, then folded it again and slipped it into my pocket. Laura stood there, arms crossed against her chest. "He's been trying, you know. Got a job at the car wash. Helps with bills. It's not much, but it's something." "I'm glad," I said. She looked at me for a long time, searching for something in my face that wasn't there anymore. "You really meant it, didn't you? When you left." "I did. I thought you'd come back angry, or ready to forgive. But you just left." I set another box in the truck bed. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting." She took a step closer. "You think walking away fixed anything?" "No," I said quietly. "But staying broke everything else." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the water still running from the hose, splattering onto the concrete. Dylan shut it off finally, coiling it slowly. He walked over, his shoulders stiff, eyes fixed on the ground. "Hey," he said, barely audible. I turned toward him. "Hey," he swallowed hard. "I didn't mean what I said, back then." "Yeah, you did," I replied. "You just didn't understand what it would cost." He nodded once, eyes glassy but dry. "I get it now. I hope you do." We stood there, two figures framed by sunlight and silence. I wanted to reach out, maybe place a hand on his shoulder, but something inside me refused. The gesture would have been dishonest. What we'd lost wasn't touchable. It lived in the space between us, permanent, invisible. Laura wiped at her eyes. "You could stay for dinner," she said. "Just one meal. It doesn't have to mean anything." "It always means something," I said. She looked down. "I guess it does." I closed the tailgate and walked to the driver's side. The heat from the metal seared my hand. A brief, stinging reminder that this place still had a way of marking me. Dylan stepped back, giving me room. Before I climbed in, I looked at him one last time. "Take care of her," I said. "I will. And take care of yourself. Don't make her carry you." He nodded again. "I'm trying." I believed him, though belief no longer meant attachment. It was simply acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance that he'd have to learn the same lessons the hard way, through loss, through labor, through silence. As I pulled away, I saw them in the rearview mirror. Laura standing beside Dylan, both of them watching until the truck turned the corner. No waves, no tears, just the steady gaze of people finally seeing the shape of what they'd driven away. The drive back to the lake felt lighter. The sun dipped low, throwing long shadows across the highway. The desert spread out endless and red, a sea of heat fading into dusk. I rolled down the window and let the wind carry the dust across my face. It didn't sting anymore. When I reached the cabin, the sky had gone violet. I unpacked the boxes into the small room. Tools, books, the photograph of Ethan and me at a fishing pier. I set it on the table beside Dylan's note. Two versions of fatherhood staring back at me. One chosen, one rejected, both lessons in their own way. I made coffee, sat on the porch, and listened to the night settling in. Somewhere across the lake, a coyote howled. The sound carried, mournful and proud. I thought about Laura and Dylan, about the hollow rooms they'd returned to, the bills waiting, the quiet that would hang between them. I didn't feel satisfaction, only inevitability. People say leaving is easy. It isn't. Staying gone is the hard part. I reached into my pocket, unfolded Dylan's note again. The paper had softened with sweat, the ink slightly smudged. I understand. Maybe he did. Maybe understanding was enough. The wind picked up, scattering dust across the porch. I let the note fall onto the table. The lamplight flickered, its glow touching the edges of the page before darkness swallowed it again. I thought about going back one more time, to see if they'd changed, to test if forgiveness could bloom where trust had died. But then I remembered the feel of that first morning at the lake. Silence, peace, the absence of needing to prove myself. That memory was sacred now. Some peace isn't meant to be disturbed. I leaned back, eyes on the horizon. The stars began to appear, faint at first, then steady. I whispered to no one in particular, "I'm not your wallet anymore, not your safety net, just the man who once disappeared." The lake answered with a quiet ripple, as if agreeing. I stayed there until dawn, the sky bleeding slowly into light. When the first bird called out across the water, I finally smiled. Not because anything was fixed, but because it no longer needed to be. We had all learned the cost of forgetting gratitude. And maybe that was enough. So tell me, whoever listens to this story, was I wrong to vanish so completely, to let them struggle until respect took root in the cracks I left behind? Or was absence the only honest gift I had left to give?